Real, true education, not fake news. 25th of May 2020. You're welcome back for the last in my series on this case, which I hope you find informative. And I'm going to go through it now. And so we're talking about the German court case, right? And so we go with it. So the National Court and the Court of Justice of the EU are two different things. The Court of Germany is like the Supreme Court in Ireland, and the Court of Justice in the EU is the Supreme Court of the EU. And the national courts are subsidiary. They're secondary. In other words, the Court of Justice of the EU is higher ranking and can make decisions binding on the national courts. Okay, so we see what happened in this case. A group took it to the ECJ. The ECJ made a ruling which, in my opinion, is against the treaties. They ruled that there's no need to carry out a proportionality test before the EU gives money all around to the member states as part of its policy, and this is 5 years before the coronavirus outbreak, so it's not connected with it, although it may be affected by it. So the arguments were that the EU can give out this money without any assessment on proportionality, and the 17 people who took the case said no, it's a way beyond their powers, they can't do it. So essentially the ECJ saying they don't need to do a proportionality test, and you had the local court, the Supreme Court in Germany, saying you do. And what's more, they said it must abide by the treaties, and that they exceeded their powers. So you can see that there's a direct conflict there. They exceeded their powers by giving this money out, throwing it all around the place, which is what they're doing, and propping up all kinds of dodgy schemes and governments. So it said that the EU must conduct an assessment. Now, big play is made of the fact that the German court did not say they can't give the money. They didn't do that. They said they must conduct the necessary assessment. Okay, and as I said, that's in energy, they're legally obliged to conduct the assessment, and they refuse to do it. In the case of this law, it may not be any directive requiring them to do it, but the Treaty on the Function of the EU says they have to operate proportionally. They can't treat money and lending and give money to other states and banks without being proportional, and so that means that they must do the assessment. That's my reading of it. I can't find anything to say they should do it. So here we have a conflict. Okay, now essentially what those commentators made, and one former employee of the ECB made the point that it is laughable. They just can't meet for 5 minutes. Oh, we'll meet and throw it out. They have to debate it and discuss it. There has to be other views taken into account. And in my opinion, it'd have to be subject to some kind of judicial process as well. They have to do it right. But now we have a situation, we know well what to do if they got away with it. They do a sham assessment. Now we have a situation where it has to be documented, and the German court may not accept a sham assessment, even though the German court is not as high ranking as the European Court of Justice. So the German court ruled the assessment was not done. It gave the EU 3 months to do it. So this came out. This is mid-May, mid-June, mid-July, mid-August. So you're talking about early autumn when this comes on. The court, I presume, could give them another couple of months, but I don't think the ECB is going to want to do this. They're not going to sit down and do this assessment. This will grate at them. These people are driven by a religion rather than any kind of pragmatism, and you have a good old crisis brewing there. Now, so Merkel tried to play it down, and no doubt she will try to play it down. But yet there is an order of the German Supreme Court there. How is she going to play that down if it's served on the Bundesbank? Remember, the ECB can hand the money over in a cheque, but the Bundesbank doesn't have to take it. It can refuse to take it, and it has to refuse to take it. So when it refuses to take it, here you have a member state refusing to participate in this, PSPP, purchase of government bonds and by definition by bank bonds, purchase of bank bonds. In other words, lending to governments and lending to all these banks that are play acting. So, and also lending to governments which are genuinely stuck. They just can't raise the money because they don't have the economies to raise it. So this is the thing. So Lord King, former governor of the Bank of England. Now he wouldn't be on the EU side really, but he said Germany should consider leaving the EU because no matter how it goes, the bill is there. The euro can't continue if Germany and Greece and Spain and Ireland are let fall. The euro will collapse. You can't have that in that situation. These countries would have to go back to their own currencies. So Michael McDowell was in yesterday's paper. Yes, he did. He said it brought the authority of the EU into question. He did say that, and he had more to say on it. I didn't buy it, but he made that point. So also former ECB board member, there's a fellow there on the internet, and he makes a point that it's laughable that the European Central Bank did not do any assessment on the impact of this, as I've said in the earlier video. But he also points out that in other countries there's nothing thought of what happened. I mean, in America, for example, like in Wyoming, a non-industrial region, it couldn't go on if it didn't have money from the main federal government and from the richer parts. Likewise in Britain, certain parts of the north of England are helped out. Scotland's helped out. Northern Ireland gets 11 billion of a subsidy every year, of a direct payment. Ireland, I'm sure it subsidises, I don't want to name particular parts, but the bill for social welfare and all the things that's needed, health and all that for western counties that are not too highly populated. I presume perhaps Sligo would be one, maybe Leitrim, maybe Mayo, maybe even Cavan, doesn't really matter. Longford, I don't know, and Monaghan. Monaghan is a very, very productive county, so the tax take from there would be quite big, and Cavan's fairly productive as well. But the point about it is they couldn't have the services that they have if they weren't bailed out by the East Coast, which is producing all the tax revenue. So it's the same in Wyoming, and nothing is thought of that. West of America, we don't think a thing about that because that's the way it's done. Each country has to look after everyone. We're all citizens. So I think you get the idea there. So one part will support the rest. Now, there's a difference here in that these are separate countries. The EU never went in for this. It never went so far as to say they're one union. So Ireland, rural Ireland is an example of being supported by the richer part of Ireland and by the EU. And political union is in Britain, it's in Ireland, it's in the United States and Canada. So there is no question that's political union, but it's not in the treaties. There is not political union in the treaties. That couldn't be got through. It probably wouldn't be voted for here. People wouldn't give away their freedom. And you'd need a president of the EU and all. People are reluctant to do that. So there isn't political union. There's just a kind of a halfway house of a Bookshi system. So a political union would mean Germany and Holland carrying big spending Greece. So if you had political union, Germany and Holland in particular, I presume Luxembourg, maybe, I don't know, some of them, they'd have to carry the other big spending neighbours. So while the German people would be saving their pennies and not going on holidays and all that and living frugal lives, the Italians and the Greeks would be living it up. I mean, they used to have conditions that you could retire at 47. And if you worked in a hairdresser's, you could invite all your customers to come home to your house and you could clip their hair there. So I'd say that's going on at the minute with the coronavirus. But that's the kind of thing. And the bus drivers were entitled to a pint of milk every so often on their route, and shops had to keep accounts to pay for it. I mean, they really treated themselves like kings. This is what happens when people go for pampering rather than an industrial base. So effectively what's happening here is the European Union, political union, by the back door. By the back door. Political union by the back door. Bring it in this way. So the Court of Justice can now the Court of Justice of the EU, it can take enforcement proceedings. It can do that, and it probably will. Be interesting to see what they do. Very interesting. Will they try and do some kind of an assessment, or will they take the German court to task? But it'll take years. You're talking, would it ever even come out in my lifetime? Your lifetime? Might of a young person. They've just 3 months to act, so there's a crunch in August. I think for now the EU will not take action. That's my view. I'm not sure. For now anyway. Even the do, you're talking about years. I think the German court will abide by its own law. I mean, that's its law. It'll be very hard politically or any other way for the German government to overrule its own court. Now remember, in the Derrybrine wind farm here, Ireland has been fined, I think it's 15,000 a day. They were fined several million, I think it's 5 million or 15 million, because they couldn't do the environmental impact assessment, and I've done a video on that. But they're paying it, that's all. As far as I understand the VRT on cars, they should be given that EU rates, and that's they're being fined on that. So what happens in these cases to pay the fine? So how is the European Court of Justice going to fine Germany? How much will it have to fine them? You'll be talking about a lot of money to bail out Greece. So the fine would be seen as a bailout for Greece and Italy and Spain and Ireland, and is entitled to fine it that much. Now, the Bundesbank must obey the German court. It's a court order. And the court order is assessment will be subject to judicial... Oh yeah, if they do the assessment, if they do a written assessment, it'll have to be in writing. And that could be, not sure of this, subject to judicial review. So if they skimp over something and don't deal with one of the impacts, like keeping businesses, failing businesses alive, or keeping banks which are uneconomical alive, and therefore interfering with the concept of a free market open economy of the EU, well then it could be subject to a JR if they don't do it right. It could be challenged in the courts. And you're back to square one. And how can they justify what they're doing? How can they justify something that was never agreed to in the Lisbon Treaty or anything else? And how long can Germany pay the big spenders? 5, 10, 20, 30 years? How long are they going to be prepared to keep them propped up? George Soros said it was a threat to the EU, and he'd be a very left-wing person. He made a fortune when the convergence mechanism of the UK collapsed. He bet on it collapsing and he made a fortune. The other thing is Britain's gone, so there's funding gone there. Britain will not be funding into the future. Then you have the coronavirus thing, and the jury's out on what effect that will have. I don't think it's going to help. It's going to leave people poorer. And how will the various bailouts under it affect this? How will it affect countries? I mean, the problem is there's no production in these countries. They haven't been fixed. There's no production. And the problem is there's no enthusiasm within the EU to encourage industrial activity. Anyone that had set up a business at the minute in Ireland, in anywhere in the EU, would be mad. Anyone that's running a business will tell you it's a nightmare. I mean, some of the regulations actually conflict with each other. You have to do this under that regulation and do that under the other. And I'll be doing more on that in due course. The EU law and the EU directives are nuts, and the way they're transposed is nuts. You have the Planning and Development Act in Ireland amended, which is an act signed by the President, amended by statutory instruments signed by a minister, which he can't do. And they're doing this stuff. How would you go into court with that type of law? So there's a tussle between member states and the EU. And the Polish Prime Minister has come out cheering. He says it's a great idea. He's fighting them too over judges' retirement. So you see this pressure and all that. And you have the Italians, they feel they're in a straitjacket, and they're beginning to complain now they got no help from the EU on the coronavirus and COVID-19. And this is how, in my opinion, no doubt about this is how countries like Ireland are pushing this left-wing agenda. They want migrants, they want renewable energy, they want everything. Why? Because these are the exceptions. The EU can send them money. They can get this printed money and get it in to keep them going. That's why they want all this. They may want it anyway, but when you bring in a crowd of migrants, you can send the bill off to the EU and they pay it and there's no remarks passed. That's why all these crazy things, that's why companies running windmills and wind farms are able to talk about contracts for difference. Every possible concoction is thought up so that they can get this money for the European Investment Bank, the European Union, the ECB, the European Central Bank, and all of this. They're all hands out for this. They're just like beggars, right? So, Germany, of course, is pumping in the money at their end, and we're getting out under this fraud. So there's wind farms, there's other crazy schemes. They get printed money, and they never pay it back because they keep rolling over the bonds, keep rolling them over, and that is unsustainable. And there's various views on this. In my opinion, there are two things missed by those commentating, by the media. There's two things not seen. Maybe more than that, actually, now that I just think of it. One is the fraud in their company accounts. The accounts of companies are being audited and certified as a going concern and sound, and they're not. The audit process is failing. And I can tell you in Ireland the financial regulator is failing. Will not even investigate something where it's a criminal offence that I point out to him. That has to be everywhere. So nobody knows that. Nobody realises that's happening. You can nearly write anything in a set of accounts at the minute. Now, so the EU and member Eurozone states are incompetent and bad financial managers. So apart from that, the EU itself are bad financial managers. They're not very smart. They're not very competent. I don't know who makes the decision. I always get this impression. There's a couple of youngsters in there making the coffee and having a chat about pop music, and they come out and they make this decision and they throw it all around. And as for our MEPs, I'd like to hear from them. I'd like a debate with them, please. If you want to talk about it, I'd like to hear about it. So the other thing is the green madness is flying ahead as if there's no tomorrow. Don't forget to look at Planet of the Humans and see the destruction they're doing. They couldn't have looked for what they're doing. And this happy talk, oh, we'll punch above our weight. Oh, we'll be an energy hub. Now there's going to be an energy hub in the Midlands with Richard Bruton. He's going to make more windmills. And so what's the chances of the EU surviving all this? Hard to know. My guess is there's a 35% chance it'll survive for 4 years about. There's a 65% chance it won't. I don't know. I don't know, really. I think they are in trouble. I think it's going to be very difficult. But if someone says everyone's in trouble with this COVID-19 now, they definitely crave political union. And Ireland's constitution, I don't think they'd vote for it here. So they're not going to get political union. So you have this halfway house limbo situation at the minute. Personally, and this is my view, and I want this video and these 3 videos to be seen as my opinion of what's happening on the facts, on everyone, not giving my own opinion, but on this opinion, because of the scourging and the cruelty and the tyranny that the EU has turned out to do on us, and because I supported it for so long, because I believed these treaties. I read them and I believed them and I recommended them. And now I see the renege on it in every way, and I go outside the door here in Kingsford and all I hear is the desperate noise of the wind turbines and people driven mad over this. And I know a lot of people will tell you, oh, it was Britain mad to get out because they now have the EU to back them up. I think it's the opposite. I think, in other words, Britain has its fish, and I think they're keeping them. And anything the EU is going to be looking for money and bailing out Italy and Greece, I don't think that's on. So, in my view, I'd rather live personally on tea and bread for the rest of my life. If I got a bit of marmalade, it'd be an ad. Than live in the EU and be well looked after. I don't want their political union. I don't want them. I don't want nothing to do with them. They have soured people, and they've soured me, and they're not fit for purpose. I'd like to see some kind of a new arrangement where we negotiate with other member countries and reshape it to a good agreement and a good let's live together in peace and harmony and prudence and wisdom. I'd like to see that type of an entity, but that's wishful thinking, and the more it's probable the whole thing will collapse down around them, and when it does, the financial situation and the fact that the euro collapses, I just don't know how that's going to pan out. I will say, and in an earlier video I said, those who have pensions or anything else, it's very dodgy. Those who have money in banks, or those who have shares in banks, maybe the Bank of Ireland might not be let fall. They say the AIB won't be let fall. Well, people had the price of good farms in the banks before the financial collapse of 2008. And what happened? They never got a penny. You only got your deposit. They never got a penny. And this time there's no pension fund or nothing else. It is criminal what our own government has done, and it's criminal what the EU has done. There's no need for this. This is total blackguardism of the highest order. And now we have this crisis, folks. You know how it's going to pan out. It might pan over, there might be no problem. But you have a situation where the most powerful country in the EU, its Supreme Court, makes one ruling, and the EU will try to overturn that ruling and force it to do something else. And the bottom line is, the EU cannot go on without Germany. If Germany pulled out of it, you're talking about Ireland, Greece, Italy and all those crowd. It'd just be a laugh, and particularly with the UK gone. And I think Brexit may not be the last country. That's the way it's gone. It's sad, and that's the way it is, and I'm on 21 minutes. That's long enough now. I hope I've explained that to you folks. If I come out a bit harsh and you don't approve of what I say about the EU and my sentiments on it, I'd still ask you to consider that I've informed you fairly well. I've went to a lot of trouble to make these videos. That's the idea, to be real. Real, true education, not fake news. It's not to be popular. But it would be great if you could give me a thumbs up or down. When you give a thumbs up and down, and if you want to subscribe to my channel, that would be great as well. And there's no messing with me. I never publish your identity. You get no junk mail. There's nothing like that. You're just here. You can send me a wee message if you want. I know some people hate what I'm saying. I know the left crave the EU. They don't want this happening. But I'm sorry. I'm just being a little more ahead of everybody else. We're in for a big financial shock, in my honest, humble opinion. It's there in some of the papers. I'm not sure it now. I mean, here, look at recession like we've never seen. And that's in the UK. So not just my opinion, folks. Folks, you listen to my 3 videos, and I'm very thankful. And the best of luck to you all. We'll be back for something else. I have a few other little gems coming up as well. And thank you, and we'll see you back. Bye!